Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the suspect in the murder of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. What we know about the suspect and the latest in the investigation, Jack Bradley is at Utah Valley University to hear more from witnesses and students. President Trump remembering Charlie Kirk and the president's message to those who fear for their safety. Mario Tzu at the White House. Military personnel and Pentagon workers are warned against making inappropriate comments aimed at the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Jason Blair brings us more on the announcement. And NATO is launching a new operation near its border with Russia. Arian Pazdar has the details and the reason behind the move.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. More details are emerging on the shooting of Charlie Kirk. NTD's Jack Bradley has more for us from the Utah Valley University.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him.
The man accused of killing conservative influencer Charlie Kirk is behind bars. The suspect, Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old living 270 miles south of Utah Valley University, where Kirk was killed. He was not a student here. A family member told a family friend who turned him in, and he arrived on campus on Wednesday in a gray Dodge Challenger around 8:30 a.m. He was dressed in a different set of clothes, and then Robinson brought up to a family member during dinner, according to authorities, that before the shooting, he knew Charlie Kirk was coming to the university and expressed his dislike about him. Investigators found Robinson exchanged messages on Discord with his roommate. They included messages about the need to find a rifle and those related to where the rifle will be left later on. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said the bullets were inscribed with messages, one reading, "Hey fascists, catch," another, "Bella Ciao," a famous anti-fascist song from Italy.
It is also much bigger than an attack on an individual. It is an attack on all of us. It is an attack on the American experiment.
FBI Director Kash Patel is thanking the public for sending in over 11,000 tips, saying if it were not for their help, it would have been impossible to put the suspect behind bars.
In less than 36 hours, 33 to be precise, thanks to the full weight of the federal government and leading out with the partners here in the state of Utah and Governor Cox, the suspect was apprehended in a historic time period. This would not have been possible without you, the media, and you, the public.
Governor Cox said that they will pursue the death penalty, and Robinson has been charged with aggravated murder and is being held in Utah County Jail. Several students here at the university laying flowers at a small memorial here on campus. Many students were relieved that the suspect is now in custody.
It helps me rest a little easier at night knowing that he's been caught. Charlie Kirk, I think, to most Americans, or especially his followers, was a symbol of free speech.
I feel shame. I feel embarrassed that it happened in Utah.
Very relieving. It was scary. A few days after they caught one guy, turned out not being him, then they got another guy not being him. So we live in a world today where if someone doesn't like what you say, then your life is in danger. And
I know I saw this video of Charlie saying, if he passed away, what's something he could be remembered for, right? And it was his faith. And I think that was he truly did do that.
All he's ever done was speak freely, and we're allowed to do that in America. That's what America is.
Governor Cox added that U.S. adversaries are spreading disinformation about this incident.
We have bots from Russia, China, all over the world that are trying to instill disinformation and encourage violence.
The memorial for Charlie Kirk will be held next week in Phoenix, Arizona. Reporting from Orem, Utah, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
President Trump calling for unity in an hour-long interview on Fox and Friends this morning. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu, who's at the White House. Good evening, Mari. President Trump broke a lot of news this morning. His interview in New York ranged from the Fed to crime to his feelings about Vladimir Putin. But of course, the main subject of conversation was still Charlie Kirk. What did the president say about Charlie?
Good evening to you too, Tiff. Yes, President Trump this morning was actually the first to break the news, announcing the suspect's arrest. And as Jack just said, and we now know, the suspect, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, is in custody, being held without bail in a Utah jail. And this arrest is coming just one day after President Trump eulogized Kirk at the Pentagon memorial ceremony honoring victims of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. At that ceremony, President Trump also announced that he will be posthumously awarding Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And President Trump today is now recounting for the first time the moment that he learned that Kirk had been shot. Take a listen.
He said, "Charlie Kirk is dead." I didn't know what they meant. And I said, "Dead? And it was like, I just told these people, get out, just go."
The president says he heard the news when he was with the architect overseeing White House renovations and responded in disbelief. A large part of President Trump's remarks this morning, however, focused not on what's happened since Kirk's assassination, but on the effect Kirk had in life. President Trump remembers the effect that Kirk had on young people, including even his own son, Barron.
And Barron came to me and he said, "Dad, I'd like to meet somebody that you know." "Who?" "Charlie Kirk." I said, "What?" I thought he was going to say, "I want to meet like King Charles or something." And I set up a lunch with him, and he came back. He said, "That guy's great, Dad. That guy's great." It was cute. He's unbelievable. I don't know what it was. Charlie had a magic over the kids.
Turning Point, the organization founded by Kirk, helped to encourage younger voters to turn out for President Trump during his 2024 campaign. President Trump has credited Kirk with helping secure his return to the White House this year.
No Republicans ever won, and I won by 37%. And Charlie Kirk will tell you TikTok helped, but Charlie Kirk helped also. Oh, he just happens to be here. Look at it. He loves that we mentioned that name, right, Charlie?
And reflects on his passion for speaking to young people.
But Charlie would call me up. "I'm president of the United States," and I get a call like a day before. "Sir, could you come to Arizona tomorrow?" I said, "Charlie, I'm president. I can't just come." He said, "It's so important."
President Trump also confirms he's had a long conversation with Kirk's wife, Erica. The president says that while she is, of course, devastated, he also is encouraging her that something might grow out of this tragedy and that turning point might grow out of this tragedy. Tiff.
And Mari, this assassination and other recent news like the North Carolina stabbing have raised concerns about safety, with members of Congress canceling their events. What's the president's message to Americans who may be feeling scared or defeated right now?
Tiff, last night a reporter actually asked President Trump as he was on his way to New York if he was concerned or scared for his own safety, and this is what he said.
Not really. I'm really concerned for our country.
The president on his way to the New York Yankees game Thursday night, saying that Kirk was...
He was an advocate of nonviolence. That's the way I'd like to see people respond.
At the Yankees game, Kirk's photo was put on the video board, and the Yankees held a moment of silence to honor him before the game. These questions around security are coming as the federal trial of the man charged with attempting to assassinate President Trump last September reaches its 5th day. And on Tuesday night, while dining out for the first time in D.C. this term, protesters got very close to President Trump in the restaurant, raising concerns about his security. But President Trump is saying,
"I say you have to go forward. You just have to go forward."
The president urges Americans in this moment to move forward in unity rather than live in fear of political violence. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, videos of people mocking his death are sparking outrage across social media. What does this reflect about the current state of our culture, and is there a hopeful path forward? NTD Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
What was your initial reaction upon seeing what happened in Utah this week?
Just tremendous sadness. I'm from Arizona and watched him kind of flourish in Arizona as a local and then going to the national stage. And it's just so sad.
I feel sorry for Charlie Kirk and his family. I really do. I'm not one of those guys who will just assassinate his character. You know, any man deserves to live. Like he said a lot of times, life is very precious. So
right now, we're seeing a lot of animosity online where people are, lashing out against Charlie even after he passed away. Right? We're seeing a lot of people celebrating his assassination. What does this say about the culture that is being fostered online right now under these kinds of narratives?
Well, it's unfortunate. There's been, in a time like this, at a point like this, there's no room for the vitriol that is being spewed.
We're not enemies. We're not supposed to be. That's not what God directed us to be. But I think a lot of people have turned their back on God. To wish any human being dead just because of their opinion, you're so off center of being where we need to be as people.
People in human form, but we live amongst a lot of demons, so anybody celebrating death, you know, it tells you what type of person they are.
He's somebody's father. He's the husband. He's a child of his parents' friends. I know that his wife will keep his memory alive because that's all she has. But that little boy's never going to remember him, and it's heartbreaking.
At the moment, we're seeing a lot of the people on both the left and the right coming together, mourning the loss of Charlie Kirk, and condemning people who celebrated his death. Does this give you hope?
It does give me hope because, you know, people do have a heart. Of course, there's going to be people who are against him. There's going to be people who are with him, but at the end of the day, a human is a human. A loss of life is a loss of life.
I have a lot of hope. I have hope for this nation. You know, this nation was created under God, and I have hope. If we turn to God, we will succeed.
We're standing in front of the Lincoln Memorial. You've been in there. You've read the inscriptions on the walls. When Lincoln was talking about the Civil War, he still had hope because he was focused and centered on God.
And to delve deeper into Charlie Kirk's shooting suspect, we have with us Jimmy Graham. He's a former CIA protective and retired Navy SEAL. He's also the founder of Able Shepherd. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here. Now, it took a little over 30 hours from the criminal act to having the suspect in police custody. Your thoughts on the speed of the process?
You know, I think it's still too early. This is going to sound more, but the reason why I believe that it may be this person, because there's all this conspiracy theory going on, right? And there's you know, is it somebody that was placed there because of what a target that Charlie Kirk is and was? But then there's also this new woke agenda that people are just unhealthy and mad. But the person's still alive. So typically, if you've seen that kind of placed fall guy that I'm hearing everybody speculate about, he wouldn't be alive, right? So there's a lot of facts that we need to take some time and figure this out, make sure it's the right person. I do like seeing law enforcement working together and allowed to do their job, and time will still tell.
And what does it say to you that the public was so willing to help in this case? You know, thousands and thousands of tips were sent to the FBI.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, I've been saying this all day on interviews, is how powerful Charlie Kirk was and then why. So when we talk about Charlie Kirk, I can't remember, and I didn't know what was going to happen, just like when I heard the president had been shot. This was different. This grabbed me in my soul, and I screamed at the windshield driving down the street. At the same time, I got news about a shooting in Colorado where I live, not far from where we are. So both of those things landed, and I started praying, please God, not this one, not Charlie Kirk. Right, the level of reach that he broke through boundaries of Hollywood, of sports, of all of the things where there's barriers, they didn't apply to Charlie Kirk. And we have to ask ourselves why. His devout faith and the fact that what he said was right and he stood for the truth and the way he did it was impeccable.
And in your view, how important was it that the suspect was caught quickly? What message does that send to those who might try to use violence again?
You know, I think that people, if they used violence where violence is out of turn, it's exactly against what Charlie Kirk stood for. So again, examining why did he have an impact on the world? I couldn't believe that he spoke to my children. My oldest daughter, 17, recently started a Turning Point USA chapter here locally. A lot of her girlfriends are in that. My younger daughter's in that, and she wanted to change the world, and Charlie Kirk was both of their mentors. My wife found comfort in the words of Charlie Kirk, and I was inspired by his words. And I don't know another person that grabs the whole entire family like that. Everybody I talk to, including myself, we feel like we lost a family member, and that's super powerful. That's why he was killed. So I think to catch somebody quickly in today's technology, it must be, because everybody's going to speculate while we're on the hunt, and here comes we don't trust the government anymore. It was my team in Benghazi, Libya on September 11th. So on September 12th and 11th, I'm asked, do I trust the government? I'm like, not like I used to, not before my time in the SEAL teams and CIA. And I would love to have a government that I trust. We're getting closer to that, but what is the truth, right? Who's the person I did trust? Charlie Kirk. Why? Because he earned it. He'd been through the fire, come out the other side, and he was willing to stand as a man, and I appreciate that.
Authorities tied Robinson to the crime through a review of online messages, interviews with his family members and friends, and surveillance video. Now, the messages included some sent on the messaging app Discord. Journalist Andy Neal wrote on X today, quote, all of these young high-profile shooter and mass shooters in the U.S. are actively on Discord. Some as minors were radicalized and groomed on there. How do we prevent this from happening to more young people?
We need to model strength. So this are people, serving their wants and needs. There's a book called Comfort Crisis. It's fantastic. And it's not, it outlines what will we pay for our comfort? And the answer appears to be everything. So whether it's maybe an uncomfortable discussion within the home, whether people look at me funny when I say the truth out loud, this is the whole reason why Jordan Peterson has a platform. People pay to watch Jordan Peterson boldly speak the truth. That's awesome because he's awesome, but it's also ridiculous. We should all be boldly speaking the truth. So when you're not doing it in your home, you're lying to kids, you remove the truth that built the greatest nation, which is Christian principles, from school, there's consequences. And we're seeing these consequences. So my company, Able Shepherd, we launched this years ago. We're on 13 years, knowing that there was going to be consequences in school shootings, in violent encounters, and we weren't wrong, right? So when you plant crazy and crazy comes up, you're going to have to deal with that. And that's what we're looking at. And it's going to get worse, by the way.
And lastly, how do you think young people especially can best honor Charlie Kirk's legacy?
You honor Charlie Kirk by not disgracing him, right? So to go to senseless violence and all those things, it's exactly opposite of his entire message, right? You honor him by looking at and studying his life. And again, his life was a testimony to the truth. Make your life a testimony to the truth. I can foresee, remember Charlie, do it for Charlie. Charlie be the first person to tell you, do it for Christ. It's like he was on a path, join the path. He was shepherding and saying, I'm going, you're invited. And I said we pick up that torch and go. September 10th now is on my calendar with September 11th as a turning point. And that would honor him to make that a turning point in my life, in my family, and in this nation. Let's do it. I hope a grass fire starts in a good way for Turning Point USA, and I'll be there cheering it on and funding it.
Well, Jimmy Graham, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Social media has played a part in many recent high-profile acts of violence, and lawmakers are taking note. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez takes a closer look.
In the past couple of years, there have been a number of high-profile cases of political violence that have raised concerns among lawmakers, in particular due to a common denominator that is fueling extremism. David DePape, the man who attacked Paul Pelosi in October of 2022, had a history of sharing and consuming extremist conspiracy theories on social media. Matthew Crooks, the 20-year-old who shot President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania in 2024, endorsed political violence on the social media platform Discord. Ryan Ruth, who also tried to kill President Trump in 2024, also endorsed fringe groups online. And in the assassination of United Healthcare CEO, the murderer, Luigi Mangione, became a social media hero.
Quite frankly, this is an ongoing trend that we have where we blow off all the different issues that are out there, whether it be on social media or conspiracy theories on things, and say that's just something else that has no effect, when it does. When people are dehumanized, when we only see people as what we see on the social media post on it, then we begin to assume that's all that they are, which is false.
The man behind the arson attack against Governor Josh Shapiro displayed political radicalization and violent intent on his social media. So did Elias Rodriguez, who shot 2 Israeli embassy staffers in D.C. earlier this year. And on the other hand, the lack of immediate information on the shooter who killed the former Speaker of the House of Minnesota and the shooter that killed Charlie Kirk produced an influx of extremist commentary on social media platforms.
The vitriol, the level that is there now, the hatred that has been fomented, there's a lot of the people, I think, that find pleasure in stoking that fire, and it's dangerous. There are deranged people in society. And if they are encouraged along this way, they will do dangerous things, increasingly so. We see that.
According to the profiles of individuals radicalized in the United States, a dataset gathered by the University of Maryland, social media plays a role in about 90% of the radicalization of extremist individuals. This includes what scholars call algorithmic radicalization, which is when search engines or social media platforms use the small changes in the online behavior of an individual to direct them to extremist content and networks.
Between April 2021 and January of 25, there were over 50 indictments against individuals who have worked to provide material support or carry out an attack on behalf of foreign terrorist organizations like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah. Almost all of these individuals have been radicalized by terrorist media propagations.
Currently, the FBI has some 2,700 open investigations into domestic terrorism. That's some 2,700 open investigations into politically motivated violence. That number has doubled since spring of 2020. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And joining us now to explore the reactions of U.S. adversaries to the assassination is National Security Advisor Casey Fleming. He's the chairman and CEO of Black Ops Partners. Casey, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this tragedy. Many are mourning following the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the huge champion of free speech that he was. Now, Charlie said in the past, quote, "When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That is when civil war happens." Talk to us about the big picture here of what his assassination means in terms of free speech.
It really is a turning point, the pun intended. It's a time for all of us to step back and understand really what's going on. The biggest issue right now is our young kids are being radicalized on social media. It's through a technique or a warfare method called cognitive warfare. Over 50% of Gen Z gets their news from TikTok and other social platforms, but mainly TikTok. TikTok is a CCP, Chinese Communist application. We're actually under this thing called unrestricted war against America. It's under no rules, and it's to weaken the United States by all means and any means necessary. Cognitive warfare is one piece of that. So the way to combat it, number one, is to understand that we are all being played on social media. What I tell people when I speak to large groups, I say, when you pull that cell phone or that smartphone up to your head or to your face, you need to think of it as a loaded gun. It has that much power against your brain, against your thoughts. Underneath cognitive warfare, there's also psychological warfare, narrative warfare. That's really what's going on. Now, under unrestricted warfare, we're looking at the enemy, which is the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, Iran, North Korea, who have all aligned together very strongly. They're all in line to divide Americans. So what you see, what we don't see as adults, because we don't have our nose in the phone all day, but our young certainly do. They spend an average, high schoolers spend an average of 8 or 9 hours a day on their smartphones. College students about 4 to 5. So they're being radicalized through algorithms in social media. And what we're seeing, what our team is seeing today, is just an absolute increase in the algorithms, forcing our young folks to this radicalization and division that's going on. And it's division, it's for all sides of the United States. You know, we're called e pluribus unum for a reason. And if you split us up, then it's divide and conquer. And that's exactly what our enemies are trying to do. So that's where we need to focus on this. How do we fix it? We have to go, and it's at the family level. The mother, the father, the grandmother, the grandfather has to go back to the family, their family. And if they're lacking a mother or a father, then the grandparents or uncles, aunts need to step in and say, these are our values. This is not tolerated. This is not who we are. And the United States, if we shoot people because we just disagree with them, for example, the United Healthcare CEO, because people didn't agree with him and they made him a hero on social media, and that's where our children are, following the herd mentality. And so that's got to stop at the family. You got to have dinner conversations, breakfast conversations, outing conversations. This is who we are. This is the United States. We are all about free speech, getting our messages across, have an open dialogue, and we just don't shoot people because we disagree with them.
And to your point, Utah's Governor Spencer Cox was warning about disinformation from Russia and China. He went on to say, our adversaries want violence. How does disinformation online actually translate into real-world violence?
Well, it's radicalization. You know, one thing is that our children are using these video games. A lot of them are manufactured in China. China owns many of them and drives also more cognitive warfare through these video games, as well as tracking. But that's one piece of it. So it desensitizes violence to our children. And then it's just amped up on social media where they use the algorithms to say, hey, this is we hate this. We don't stand for this. These guys are evil. These folks are no good. These folks need to be taken out. And then they send them to other messages, other posts. And don't forget, the Chinese Communist Party has many thousands of people, and now they have bots that mimic or make it exponential, the number of posts that are happening. And then you've got AI on top of that to feed the bots. So this thing is of massive proportions, hitting our children and our young adults every day, all day. So
and
that's the strategy behind this unrestricted warfare. And that is the big picture.
And in terms of combating this, the governor suggested turning off our phones and spending time with family. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. Get the kids back outside, enjoy nature, get them into sports, get them into after-school events, get them on teams, all that stuff. Go back to basics. We got lazy as a culture, and we've allowed this insidious weapon called a smartphone and the apps that are on it to penetrate our children's minds. And it's destroying our children. It's destroying their critical thinking capability. So they just take what they're told online on social media, and they cannot think critically and say, hey, look, I've got these 5 data points. Something doesn't add up. I've got these 5 data points, and it all says that this is evil, and we're going to create violence or whatever. And then it just basically reduces that line, that demarcation line that says, hey, I don't like what's happening, and then I'm going to act on it. That line, that line that they cross for action. So there's got to be conscience. There's got to be values in the family. It's go back to basic. Get the kids what they did 10, 20 years ago, even before smartphones, and that's the way to fix this thing.
Well, Casey Fleming, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with more coverage after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Department of War warns of zero tolerance for service members and civilian personnel who celebrate or mock the death of Charlie Kirk. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell gives a stiff warning following Charlie Kirk's assassination in Utah, making it clear that inappropriate comments among personnel will face consequences. He writes, "It is unacceptable for military personnel and Department of War civilians to celebrate or mock the assassination of a fellow American. The Department of War has zero tolerance for it." Parnell's post was shared by the department's main X account, as well as Department of War Secretary Pete Hegseth. Hegseth added, "We are tracking all of these very closely and will address immediately. Completely unacceptable." And the warning was echoed on various other military accounts. The U.S. National Guard shared on their main account that they are aware of inappropriate comments made by some on social media concerning the tragic death of a fellow American from political violence. Such comments are reprehensible, tasteless, and out of line with our values. Secretary of the Navy John Fallon writes, "I am aware of posts displaying contempt toward a fellow American who was assassinated. I want to be very clear. Any uniformed or civilian employee of the Department of the Navy who acts in a manner that brings discredit upon the Department, the Navy, or the Marines will be dealt with swiftly and decisively." And Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll writes, posts that celebrate or mock the assassination of a fellow American are inconsistent with Army values, full stop. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And the suspect in the killing of conservative thought leader Charlie Kirk has been identified as Tyler Robinson. According to officials, he's being held without bail in a Utah jail on several charges, including aggravated murder. Utah Governor Spencer Cox has made it clear that he considers the killing of Charlie Kirk a political assassination and says he plans to pursue the death penalty. Joining us now to discuss the upcoming legal procedure in this case is legal analyst and civil rights attorney Bobby Ann Cox. She's also a fellow at the Brownstone Institute. Bobby Ann, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Governor Cox announced that Utah is preparing affidavits to pursue the death penalty in this case. Can you explain what that process looks like legally in Utah?
Yeah, so if he's going to be seeking the death penalty in this situation, the prosecution is going to have to meet certain levels or certain thresholds for that. For example, if they're going to have this as aggravated murder, if that's going to be the main charge under Utah law, from what I understand, that's going to mean, that the assassin or the, accused assassin potentially killed somebody with premeditation, meaning he pre-planned the situation. So in that case, the prosecution is going to have to prove that this individual planned this out. It was not something that he just did, off a whim, and that they're going to have to present evidence that shows that this was premeditated by either finding things, that texts he had written about planning to do it, or any sort of notes around his home, anything that can point to he planned this out. Even things like his escape route. If he had scoped out the situation ahead of time and had planned where he was going to be at the time of the assassination, and then how he got away after he did take that shot, that fatal shot, and killed Charlie Kirk. Those are all things that are going to play into evidence going towards a premeditation in this situation. If they can prove that successfully, then yes, that would be something that under Utah law would qualify as something that would warrant the death penalty. And the death penalty is not very common. About half the states in our nation have the death penalty. And what's curious about Utah's is that they have the death penalty by injection. Lethal injection is one of the ways, but the other way is in front of a firing squad. And I believe that Utah is the only state in the nation that has that firing squad as a possibility, as a way to perform, a death penalty or carry out a death penalty sentence. So this is very serious, and the Governor Cox has said that this is what they are going to seek, is the death penalty.
And digging into that a little bit, how could evidence gathered like surveillance footage and digital messages play into the outcome of this case?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. This is how they're going to make their case. First of all, the prosecutors have to prove that they got the right person. So they do have to gather as much evidence as possible showing that this specific individual is the person that shot and killed Charlie Kirk. And as I was saying, when they have to, if they want to seek the death penalty, they will have to prove, as part of proving the murder, they will have to prove that it was premeditated. So, for example, just to give a differentiation between those two things, if the prosecution can prove that this individual indeed owned this gun or used this gun, this was the person that fired the shot that killed Charlie Kirk, it came from his gun, his fingerprints are on it, let's say, or some of his DNA are on that gun, or perhaps on the casing of the bullet that they recovered that shot and killed Charlie, that would help prove that this individual was indeed the assassin. However, if the prosecutors can't prove that he premeditated, that he thought this out, that he planned this in advance, then with evidence such as, either text messages or notes in his, in his bedroom that he left behind, or conversations that he had with either family members or friends or whoever, saying that he was going to do this or that he wanted to do this. Those are things that could serve as evidence to show premeditation. And in that instance, if the prosecutors can show premeditation and prove that he was actually the individual that pulled the trigger and did kill Charlie, then yes, then that would lead to the death penalty situation, which is what the governor said that he wants to see happen here.
And what kind of timeline are we looking at for this case? How do appeals typically factor in?
Right. So the timeline can wildly vary. It's not something that is a hard, fast, X number of months or X number of years. The timeline on a death penalty case could take months, yes, but it could also take years. It's going to depend on, how much evidence the prosecution can gather and how quickly they can gather that evidence. It's going to depend on, the courts. What do the courts look like? Are they backlogged? Do they have an overflow of cases at this point in time? So that also factors in. And it's going to also factor in on, what kinds of appeals? Are there going to be any appeals? Are there going to be negotiations for a plea deal? Is this suspect going to try to, cut a deal instead of facing a trial and possible death penalty at the end of that? These are all factors that will determine exactly how long this trial is going to take before it will come to a resolution. And that's not something that we can really project, but we can understand that it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be months, not weeks. I know people want to have retribution and resolution and accountability right away, but this is something that's going to take at least several months. It could take years, again, depending on those factors.
And speaking of factors, do you think the suspect will undergo psychological evaluations? How do courts determine whether a suspect was legally sane at the time of the crime?
Yeah, so with that, it really is up to the person that's being charged with the crime. So in this case, the accused assassin, is he going to try and plead that he was insane? I don't know. We don't know that yet. But if he does, then yes, he would have to undergo court-appointed psychological evaluations to determine whether or not he actually is mentally unstable. But if he doesn't bring that up, if he doesn't use that as part of a defense, then that's not going to be something that comes and is an issue at hand. So it really is going to depend on what is he going to plead. We have to first see that really the steps are. We have to first see what the prosecutors are going to charge him with, and then once we see what they're going to charge him with, then we're going to see, well, how does he respond to those charges? He might, have defenses for every one of the charges. He might admit guilt to one of the charges or a couple of the charges. You never know until you see what are the charges in the first place. And then we have to go from there. We have to see, does he bring up any sort of mental capacity as one of the defenses to any of the charges that are brought before him? So that is a question that we're going to have to look and see as it's coming up, whether or not he even brings it up.
A lot of factors for sure. Bobby Ann Cox, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
And we'll be right back with more coverage after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. NATO is launching a new operation to strengthen defenses along the alliance's eastern flank. The flank borders Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. The move comes after Russian drones entered Polish airspace earlier this week. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pozdar has the latest.
NATO is launching Eastern Sentry to bolster our posture even further along our eastern flank.
NATO chief Mark Rutte says the alliance will beef up its military defenses in Eastern Europe. The move comes after Russian drones entered Polish airspace on Wednesday. Poland shot the drones down. It appears to be the first time a NATO member has fired shots amid the war in Ukraine. Existing air and ground-based defenses will be enhanced, and new defense equipment will be supplied by France, Denmark, Germany and the UK. Meanwhile, President Trump says he's losing patience with Russia after the drone incursion. Here he is on Fox News.
Yeah, it's sort of running out and running out fast, but it does take two to tango. It's amazing. When Putin wants to do it, Zelensky didn't. When Zelensky wanted to do it, Putin didn't.
Russia has largely ignored Trump's calls to end the war. Trump wants Putin to enter serious peace negotiations. For its part, Moscow says the drone incursion was not intentional. Moscow ally Belarus says the drones went astray because they were jammed. But European leaders say they're certain the incursions were deliberate provocation. The Kremlin now says talks between Kiev and Moscow are deadlocked.
The Russian side remains ready to follow the path of peaceful dialogue. We're looking for ways to settle this, but the Europeans are hindering. That's the reality. It's no secret to anyone.
Peskov says the usual communication channels remain open. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
In the Middle East, Israel approved plans for a new settlement in the West Bank. Israeli officials say that puts an end to the idea of a Palestinian state. However, the UN still went ahead with a vote today to recognize Palestine as a state. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
Israeli officials signed an agreement on Thursday to make Israel's new settlement plans in the West Bank official. Thousands of homes are expected to be built in an area that would nearly divide the West Bank into two parts. Tens of thousands of Israelis are expected to move to the area east of Jerusalem over the next 5 years. Israel announced the new settlement plans just one day before multiple Western countries recognized Palestine as a state at the United Nations General Assembly. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shared his thoughts.
We said there would not be a Palestinian state, and we say again there won't be a Palestinian state. This place is ours.
On Friday, the UN General Assembly voted in favor of recognizing Palestine as a state. The French ambassador to the UN, who voted in favor of the declaration, said this.
This roadmap involves an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the release of all of the hostages. It involves the establishment of a Palestinian state that is viable and sovereign. It involves the disarmament of Hamas and its exclusion from governance in Gaza.
However, Israel's ambassador to the UN said this.
This declaration is one-sided. It does not designate Hamas as a terrorist organization, and it dares to equate the release of Israeli hostages with the release of convicted terrorists. Shame on you.
142 countries voted in favor of recognizing a Palestinian state, while the United States and 9 other countries voted against it, and 12 did not vote. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces said they have struck over 500 terrorist targets in Gaza City. Israel also ordered evacuations of Gaza City, but some residents still have not left. Others were seen evacuating to the southern Gaza Strip on Friday. And in another development, an Israeli-Russian student reunited with her family after being held hostage in Iraq. According to officials, she was kidnapped by Kataib Hezbollah terrorists during a research trip to Iraq in March 2023. Her release comes days after President Trump signed an executive order paving the way for the U.S. to designate countries around the world as state sponsors of wrongful detention. The Biden administration told her family that there was little they could do because she is not an American citizen. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.